You researched everything before you moved. The visa, the suburb, the job, the cost of rent. You opened a bank account. You got a tax file number. You did everything right. And yet, at the end of your first year in Australia, something doesn't add up. You're earning a real salary, a good one by any international standard, and somehow you're not ahead. You're barely level, or worse, you're behind. Here's what nobody told you before you landed. The average new arrival to Australia loses between $15,000 and $20,000 in their first 12 months. Not to scams, not to bad luck, but to 7 completely specific, completely avoidable financial mistakes that are invisible until you know what to look for. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what they are, and more importantly, you'll know how to stop them. Let's start with the one that costs the most, and that almost nobody catches until it's too late. Mistake 1. The superannuation black hole. Your employer is legally required to put 11.5% of everything you earn into a superannuation account. That's Australia's compulsory retirement savings system, and on paper, it's one of the most generous in the world. But here is what happens to almost every single new arrival in their first year. You start a job, your employer opens a default superannuation account for you, usually a retail fund that the employer has a commercial relationship with. You sign a form, you move on, you forget about it. Then you get a second job or a contract role, or you switch employers. Another super account gets opened. You forget about that one too. By the end of year 1, there's a very real chance you have 2 or 3 superannuation accounts, each quietly charging you administration fees, investment management fees, and insurance premiums you never requested and may not even be eligible to claim. The average administration fee across retail super funds runs between 1 and 1.5% annually. On a balance of $50,000, that's between $500 and $750 a year. Just in fees, on money you can't even access until you're 60. And here's the number that should make you stop and check your phone right now. As of 2025, the Australian Taxation Office has documented over $18.9 billion sitting in lost or unclaimed superannuation accounts. $18.9 billion. Not from people who died, from people who are alive, working, and would desperately want that money back. A significant portion of that belongs to former new arrivals who opened accounts, switched jobs, and never consolidated. What do you do right now? Log in to MyGov, navigate to the ATO section, and check how many superannuation accounts are linked to your tax file number. If you have more than one, consolidate them immediately into a single low-fee industry fund. The whole process takes less than 20 minutes. The financial difference over a 30-year career can easily exceed $100,000. Don't leave that money scattered across accounts you've forgotten. It is yours. Mistake 2. The default bank trap. When you land in Australia and need a bank account quickly, you do what almost every new arrival does. You walk into one of the big 4, Commonwealth, Westpac, ANZ, or NAB, because they're everywhere, they're familiar, and you need to get paid. That decision is understandable. It is also quietly expensive. Here is what the big 4 banks have spent decades perfecting, a fee structure so normalized that most customers never question it. Monthly account-keeping fees, ATM fees outside their network, international transfer fees that can run between $15 and $30 per transaction, on top of exchange rate margins that cost you another 2 to 3% every time you send money home. Think about that for a moment. If you're sending $2,000 home to family every month, a completely common amount for new arrivals, you could be losing between $60 and $100 every single transfer to fees and exchange rate margins. That's over $1,000 a year just to move your own money. And the international transfer fee is just the most visible part. The exchange rate margin, the gap between the real mid-market rate and the rate the bank actually gives you, is where the serious money disappears. Most of the big 4 banks apply margins of 2 to 3% on foreign exchange. A fintech transfer service typically charges under 1%. Over 12 months of regular transfers, the difference between using your default Big Four bank and using a purpose-built international transfer service can easily be $1,500 to $2,000 on the same transfers to the same people, just routed differently. What you do right now. Compare your bank's international transfer fees and exchange rates against services like Wise or a similar Australian licensed provider. Then open a no-fee or low-fee everyday account. Several Australian banks and neobanks offer zero monthly fees and free ATM access nationally. There is no reason to pay for basic banking in 2026. Mistake 3. The private health insurance trap. Australia has Medicare. You've heard that. And you assumed, reasonably, that Medicare means healthcare is covered. Here is the part that takes most new arrivals completely by surprise. If you're a permanent resident or citizen and your taxable income goes above $90,000 as a single or $180,000 as a couple and you don't have private hospital cover, the Australian government charges you a Medicare levy surcharge. That's an additional tax of 1 to 1.5% of your income on top of the standard 2% Medicare levy everyone pays. On a salary of $100,000, the surcharge alone is $1,000 per year. But here's where the trap closes. Most new arrivals, when they realize this, rush out and buy the cheapest private health insurance they can find, a basic hospital policy that costs around $150 to $200 a month just to avoid the surcharge. And then they don't use it, because they're young, they're healthy, and the public system is adequate for anything that actually comes up. So they're paying $2,000 a year in premiums, they're still paying the 2% Medicare levy, and they're also paying gap fees every time they see a specialist or get a scan, because private insurance covers the hospital, not the doctor's fee above the Medicare schedule. They are triple paying for healthcare, and they don't realize it until they add it up. What you do right now? Understand your actual threshold. If your income is under $90,000 as a single, you don't need private cover to avoid the surcharge at all. If you're over the threshold, compare the surcharge cost against the cheapest compliant hospital policy. Sometimes the policy costs less. Sometimes the surcharge is cheaper, depending on your income bracket. Do the math specific to your situation before you commit to either. Mistake 4. The rental market blind spot. You landed in a country where the rental market moves at a speed that feels genuinely hostile to someone who doesn't know the rules. And the rules are different here. In Australia, it is completely standard to be asked for your rental history, your employment documents, your payslips, your references, and a 100-point identity check just to apply for a rental property. If you're new to the country, you have none of that Australian history, so you get rejected, repeatedly. And in desperation, you take what you can get, often paying significantly above market rate for something substandard just to have an address. The premium new arrivals pay in the rental market in year one is real and measurable. Research from tenancy advocacy groups consistently shows that renters without Australian rental history pay between 10 and 20% more than comparable renters with established records, simply because they have less negotiating leverage and more urgency. On a $1,200 a week rental, a 15% premium is $9,360 over a year, just for being new. Then there's the bond. Australian residential rentals require a bond, typically 4 weeks rent up front. On that same property, that's $4,800 tied up in a government-held account, earning nothing for the entire duration of your tenancy. And then there's the furniture. Because Australian rentals are overwhelmingly unfurnished, something that surprises arrivals from the UK, Europe, and much of Asia where furnished rentals are standard. So, you're also furnishing a property from scratch in a country where the nearest IKEA might be 40 minutes away and delivery costs are genuinely painful. What you do right now? Before you arrive or immediately after, build an Australian rental application package. This means a cover letter explaining your situation and employment, payslips or a letter from your employer, a copy of your tenancy agreement from your home country, even if it's in another language, character references from employers or landlords overseas, and proof of your financial position. Agents and landlords respond better to a well-prepared application from a new arrival than to a thin one. It signals that you're organized and low risk. Mistake 5. The tax return you didn't know you were owed. Australia's financial year runs from the 1st of July to the 30th of June. That is not the same as a calendar year. It is not the same as the tax year in most countries new arrivals come from, and it catches almost everyone who doesn't know about it. Here's what happens. You arrive in Australia partway through a financial year, say in October. Your employer starts deducting tax from your pay immediately based on the assumption that you will be earning at your current salary for the full financial year. But you won't have been. You were only in the country for 9 months of that year. When the financial year ends in June, you are almost certainly entitled to a tax refund, because the withholding was calculated on a full year income that you didn't actually earn. This refund is not automatic. You have to lodge a tax return to claim it. The deadline is the 31st of October, 4 months after the end of the financial year. Miss that deadline without registering with a tax agent, and you are potentially leaving a refund of $1,000 to $3,000 sitting unclaimed. And it goes further. Many new arrivals are also unaware of the work-related deductions they can legitimately claim: home office expenses if they worked from home, professional development, union fees, tools and equipment required for their role, the cost of managing their tax affairs. These deductions can add hundreds to thousands of dollars to a refund that most new arrivals assume doesn't exist. What you do right now? Register with a registered tax agent before October 31st of your first Australian financial year. The agent's fee is itself tax deductible the following year. Make a list of every work-related expense you've incurred since you arrived and lodge. Even if you think you won't get much back, lodge, because you almost certainly will. Mistake 6. The Convenience Economy Premium. You've just moved to a new country. You don't know where things are, you don't know the shops, you're tired, you're busy, and every piece of technology on your phone is specifically engineered to take your money in exchange for not having to think about it. This is the convenience economy, and in Australia, it is exceptionally expensive. A burger and chips from a local restaurant might cost $22 if you walk in. The exact same order on a delivery app costs $39 after the delivery fee, the service fee, the small cart fee, and the after 9 p.m. surge pricing. That's a 78% markup, not for a better product, just for the convenience of not leaving your couch. The flat white on the way to work, the juice at the gym, the parking app that charges a premium because you didn't plan ahead, the grocery delivery with the platform markup. Each of these feels like a small luxury. They are individually harmless. Collectively, research commissioned by ING Australia shows that the average Australian household loses over $1,200 a year to forgotten or unused subscriptions alone, before you even count the delivery markups, the convenience surcharges, and the daily microspending. For new arrivals who are relying heavily on delivery and convenience services while they're getting established, the number is typically higher. When you combine delivery app markups, daily convenience spending, and the subscription services that started as free trials and quietly became paid, the annual cost for a new arrival household running on convenience defaults is realistically between $2,500 and $3,500. What you do right now? Spend 30 minutes auditing your bank statement. Filter for every recurring charge under $30. Any charge you can't immediately name? Cancel it. Then, calculate what you're spending monthly on delivery apps. The goal isn't to eliminate convenience. The goal is to make the choice consciously, not by default. Mistake 7. The credit file you're not building. This is the mistake that doesn't cost you money today. It costs you money in year 2, year 3, and year 5, when you want a mortgage, a car loan, or a credit card with a decent limit and a competitive rate. When you arrive in Australia, your credit history from your home country does not transfer. You start with a blank file. And a blank credit file in Australia is treated almost the same as a bad credit file. Lenders don't know who you are, so they either decline you or offer you the worst rates available. Most new arrivals don't think about this in year 1 because they're focused on getting set up. By year 2, when they want to buy a car or start saving for a property, they discover that their credit score is thin, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they haven't done anything at all. And then they take out a car loan at a 6 or 7% rate that someone with an established credit profile would get at 4.5. On a $30,000 loan over 5 years, that difference is over $2,000 in additional interest for doing nothing wrong, just for being new. Building an Australian credit file is neither complicated nor risky if you do it deliberately. The mechanisms are straightforward: a credit card with a modest limit that you pay in full every month, a mobile phone plan on contract rather than prepaid, utility accounts in your name rather than a housemate's. Each of these creates a positive record on your file. What you do right now: check your credit file immediately. All 3 Australian bureaus allow you to access your file for free: Equifax, Ilion, and Experian. See what's there, then apply for a single low-limit credit card, one with no annual fee, and use it for one recurring expense each month. Pay it in full on the due date, every single month without exception. Do this consistently for 12 months, and your file will be meaningfully established. The people who do this in year 1 are the ones who get the competitive mortgage rate in year 4. The ones who don't are the ones who pay the new arrival tax on everything they borrow for years. What this actually costs? Let's do the accounting. Superannuation fees on forgotten accounts and a high-fee default fund between $1,000 and $2,000 per year, compounding. International transfer fees and exchange rate margins at a Big Four bank versus a purpose-built service between $1,000 and $2,000 per year. Private health insurance premium paid unnecessarily or the wrong policy up to $2,000 per year. The rental market premium for arriving without Australian tenancy history between $5,000 and $9,000 in year 1 alone. The tax refund that wasn't lodged between $1,000 and $3,000 once. The convenience economy premium, delivery markups, forgotten subscriptions, daily spending on autopilot between $2,500 and $3,500 per year. And the credit file you didn't build, costs that don't show up until year 3 or 4, but when they do, they're real. Total in year 1, between $12,000 and $20,000. Not from bad decisions, not from overspending, from the default settings of a financial system that was not designed with you in mind, and that assumes you know the rules before anyone has explained them to you. Here is what I want you to take from this video. None of these mistakes are your fault. Every single one of them is a structural feature of a system that rewards people who already know how it works and quietly charges everyone else for learning. But now you know, and knowing changes everything. This weekend, do 4 things. Log into MyGov and check your superannuation accounts. Pull up your bank statement and look at what you're paying in fees. Find out whether your income puts you above the Medicare Levy surcharge threshold. And register with a tax agent before your first October 31st deadline. Those 4 actions alone will save most new arrivals several $1,000s in their first year. The system charges everyone for not knowing the rules. You've watched this video. You know them now. That changes what happens next. If this video helped you, share it with someone who just arrived in Australia. The information in here is the kind that usually takes people 2 or 3 years to figure out on their own. Subscribe if you want more. There is a lot more to cover. And we will see you in the next one.